Pokemon was one of my favourite series growing up, and recently I caught an interest in watching Nuzlocke runs, and thought, why not try one myself? If you're unfamiliar with the concept, here's the main rulings with the rest I'll explain on the journey. First, if a Pokemon faints, it's dead and we cannot use it again. We can only catch one Pokemon per location or route, and it must be our first encounter. We also play on set mode, which means when the opposing trainer's Pokemon faints, we can't see what's coming next and switch. And last two main ones, no items in battle, and our Pokemon's level can exceed the highest level of the next gym. Don't worry if anything isn't clear, you'll see as we go. I chose Emerald as it's the generation I played most as a kid, but found there was a lot I'd forgotten which caused issues throughout. But enough exposition, let's get started. By getting chucked into a moving van. Then for our first day, we had to rescue the professor from an extremely deadly Zigzagoon. I chose Mudkip for the starter, naming him Whiskers, who swiftly took out the raccoon. We ventured off for our first battle with May, who, after beating, gives us access to Pokeballs, meaning we have officially started the challenge. Now for encounters, here on Mudkip we can see we caught him, or quotations, on Route 101, meaning even though I ran into a Poochyena, I couldn't catch it. So our first proper encounter was a Zigzagoon by name Ziggy, with a calm nature, which meant lower attack, which isn't great. Next was a Poochyena named Pooch, who is timid nature, so lower attack again, but does evolve into a Mightyena with the Intimidate ability, so definitely could be useful. Went through a couple of easy battles, then accidentally ran into a final trainer, who ended up being a little bit of trouble. Now, a quick explanation on critical hits in Pokemon. In Generation 3, a critical hit does 2 times the damage of what it would normally have done, and ignores stat changes, so load attack or increased defense, yep, crit's going to ignore that. So here, Taylor does 5 damage to Ziggy, and I want to get a Growl off so it's safer to switch into Whiskers, but that is risking a crit, as if he would have got it, that would have taken Ziggy out. But he growled, and we switched into finish. Crits is something we'll need to keep in mind throughout this challenge. Met Pops in the gym and gave Wally some moral support whilst he caught his routes, then went and caught something ourselves. A Wurmple, who I called Wurmple, which evolved into a Silcoon, meaning we had a Beautifly. Would have preferred Dustox, but might have its uses. And while saving a guy in the forest from getting mugged, caught a Shroomish, named him Shrooms. Our initial counter was a Poochyena, but we have Dupes Claws, meaning we can't use more than one mon from the same evolutionary line, so we can't just stack 6 Gyarados or something like that. Couple of battles to go through. Shroomish was a bit too bulky for Pooch, but Wurmple absolutely slammed with the crit poison combo. Caught a Whismur called Flopsy before heading to the first gym. It started off well with Whiskers easily taking out the 2 Geodudes. But then Roxanne brought out her main, Nose Pass, and knew needed to do some setup here as Roxanne does have 2 potions. Started out with some sand attacks from Ziggy to reduce its accuracy, but still somehow hit a Rock Tomb. Switched out to Pooch to continue sand attacks before intending to switch with Shrooms, but then Pooch was now trapped. Unfortunately that meant it was going to be the end. With its last moments threw a beach full of sand at Nose Pass to ensure Shrooms could come in and finish off with a combination of Leech Seed, Stun Spore, and Absorb. Farewell Pooch, you did well, and we move forward with a new level cap. Next on the agenda was going to rescue an old gentleman's bird, got some goods, and ended up with the direct number of a local CEO. Handy. Into our next rival battle, where Ziggy dealt with her Wingull, and her Trico tried to get dicey with a critical hit, but Wurmple swept it. Mr. Briny then gave us a lift down to Dewford Town, where we got an old rod from a local fisherman, which we used to grab a Magikarp who I called Red, and a Tentacle called him Korra Sensei. And just before the gym leader went and caught a Geodude in the cave, who we of course called Rocky. Evolved Whiskers and heads into face Broly. Started off well with a crit finish of Machop and lowered Meditite's health low enough which made him use one of his super potions, but next came the problems with his Makuhita. I tried to paralyze him twice with 2 misses, hit on the 3rd one, but in the meantime he had got 2 bulk ups in. And it was at this point where I thought the damage was surprisingly low that I remembered in this generation all flying moves are physical. I needed to hurry. Wurmple gusted him down, with him healing from a citrus berry, and then did another bulk up. This was getting scary, and then he pulled out the reversal. I tried to finish it, but came just short, and was left on 1 HP. But the biggest problem was to come. After a super potion, I was left with the 3 bulk up boosted Makuhita with almost full health. I knew some sacrifices had to be made. Switched in Korra Sensei, who got hit hard by a 4-hit arm thrust. I tried risking a Supersonic, but failed, so that was a swift farewell. Next was Shrooms, who got a Leech Seed and a Mega Drain off before also being dispatched, but that was just enough damage though for Wurmple to come back out and finish it off. A rough fight and 2 painful losses for what could have been, but done now and moving forward. And just to note, remember this? Well, in that entire fight, he did not get paralysed a single time in all 10 attacks. That is garbage. We delivered the letter to Stephen and headed to Slateport. I tried to deliver the parts from the president but got interrupted by a double helping of Aqua Grunts. For the first one, Wurmple showed his boss with a crit absorb, and the second confused Rocky, who then proceeded to hit himself 3 times before finishing with a rock throw. The luck, or lack of, I was having with this run. Met Team Aqua's leader Archie, who said some stuff about the sea and then went off, strangely without taking the parts he wanted. Weird. Carried on catching a Minun, who I called Pikachu. Fought our first double battle, but with Rocky just cleared through easily and onto our next rival fight, but just before evolving Red and Ziggy. Started out with Pikachu, who swiftly fried her Wingull, and Whiskers dealt with Slugma, and onto Grovyle, who I swapped in red to first lower its attack with Intimidate, and used Wurmple to finish it off. I'll be honest, Wurmple, I'm sorry I doubted you earlier, you have been putting in the work. Arrived in Moorville, grabbed a bike, and had forgotten about this Wally fight, but Ralts' defense is paper, so nothing to worry about there. Got an Oddish on the neighbouring route and named it Herb, and whilst doing some exploring for some more Pokemon, I accidentally ran into a double battle, where I honestly couldn't have started with a worse pair of openers for a Roselia. I swiftly got those guys out of there and sent Wurmple in to clear it. Prepped for Watson with Rocky learning self-destruct, definitely needs to make sure I don't press that on accident, and involved Herb into a Gloom, though wasn't really needed. 3 magnitudes from Rocky, 3 beaten Pokemon. Magneton did get off Supersonic though, and knowing my luck from earlier, didn't want to risk anything, so switched out for Pikachu, wanting to Encore Manectric's Howl permanently, but used Quick Attack instead. Wasn't an issue, as back to Rocky, who one-shot with High Roll Magnitude. After getting Rock Smash, I went on a bit of a Pokemon collection hunt, with Wouse, Heat, Night Owl, Cloud, and Batman joining the team. After that, I took a break to watch some local gang beef, and then headed to Mount Chimney after a little bit of prep, which involved Rocky evolving into a Graveler, and Gyarados learning Dragon Rage, which is super useful at these lower levels. Didn't have any issues with Grunt, so straight to Maxi. Led with Mighty Ender and me with Whiskers, and I'll be honest, Water Gun wasn't doing a great amount. Managed to get him down even with him using a Super Potion, but once Whiskers entered crit range, swapped for red and finished with a Dragon Rage. Next was Zubat, who I thought was a safe swap in for Rocky, who proceeded to get demolished. Tried a Rock Throw and missed, and another Rock Throw and flinched, got confused and hit himself in confusion, and only then, finally, Rock Throw and finish. I hate this game. And finally, Camerupt. Knowing the ground move was coming, switched in red, who avoided the Earthquake and finished with 2 Dragon Rages. En route to next gym, caught a Spoink, named it Springtrap, and collected and hatched the town's egg, which ended up being a Wynot, who we called Wynot because... And then leveled up our team with Batman becoming a Golbat and Whilst becoming a Azumarill. Now, not that I had issues with any of them, but I'm pretty sure I battled every single trainer in this gym before making it to Flannery. I just could not find the way. Gonna add this to my bad luck streak tally. Finally. Flannery started well with Whilst taking out her Numel and Slugma, then on to the harder hitters. Her Camerupt came out, who survived a 4 times weak Bubble Beam. What a tank. I managed to get a sunny day off, which was annoying. Managed to still take out with 2 more Bubble Beams after it got healed. Switched to red for Torkoal to get an Intimidate off, but had forgotten it had White Smoke. Switched again in order to get rid of the Attract. Sent out Rocky, who easily resisted a Body Slam with no paralysis and hit a strong Magnitude. Torkoal set up a new Sunny Day, and I wasn't too confident in Graveler's special defense if he would take a Sun boosted Overheat, so I needed a 7 or higher Magnitude to finish this off. What was the damage roll gonna be? Phew, definitely wasn't worried. After grabbing the goggles from May, headed into the desert where we caught a Trapinch who I called Sphera, then had nothing really to do other than head straight to the next gym, where I had a bit of a scare with the first trainer. They had a Delcatty which Gyarados intimidated down, so good start there, and then mulled over whether to stay in and just Dragon Rage it down, but ended up deciding instead to switch it to Rocky, expecting a normal attack. Ooh, thank God I switched. And then on to Norman and his slacking. This was going to be rough. I started out with Ziggy against his Spinder, which took less damage than I thought it would. Norman healed when he got low, and I decided to risk a crit to avoid switching into damage. Unfortunately, he did get hit with Tita Dance, so switched into Rocky, who did take a Facade and Psybeam before finishing it off. Next, out came the slacking. I swapped to red to get an Intimidate off, but it just used counter, so finally a bit of luck. But it was time to send in my secret weapon, Why Not, who I'd evolved into a Wobbuffet. I tried to counter, but for some reason he just refused to attack, and this happened a couple of times, so changed tactics and started charming him down. Once he was -5 attack, I swapped red back in and started firing off Dragon Rages. Oh, now you finally attack. I didn't want him healing, so I used Bite to try to lower enough for a Dragon Rage to finish, then I used Facade, which, if it crit, would easily finish red. Saved. Right, now to finish. You're kidding me. Right, now I need to set up for someone else to finish him, so I used Leer next to lower his defense, and he... Loaf? Wait, what? For some reason he didn't heal slacking, and so with the next move I took him out with the final bite. Wasn't over though, as next was Vigoroth, who was sent in Whiskers to get a bit damage off, but more importantly, lower his speed. I switched to red to lower attack, and then sent Rocky in, who got in a solid Magnitude, almost taking him out. I then made a big mistake. I used Rock Throw to try and finish, not sure why, and healed him. The Rock Throw left him with more than half his health, meaning he was going to get 2 attacks on me if my next attack didn't kill, which either of those attacks could crit or get a high roll. Knowing that Norman had 1 more dangerous Pokemon coming up, I decided the safest ploy for the run was for Rocky to sacrifice himself. No crit on the attack, and Rocky self-destructed, taking Vigoroth with him. And to finish this fight off, Norman sent out his Belly Drum Lanoon, who we set up a fail-safe finish with Why Not, using Destiny Bond and then counter. If Lanoon Strike finished Why Not, he would take Lanoon with him. If not, counter would hit back to finish this off. Yeah, that was definitely going to be enough damage, but he did his job well, badge acquired. We said farewell to Rocky and Why Not, got access to Surf, and went on another Pokemon hunt, where we got Flippers, Maggie, Karma, and Lettuce. Our busy day continued as then we had to save the local Weather Institute from Team Aqua, but didn't cause any issues. Pikachu swept the water types, and Red for the admin's Mightyena race. Got gifted a cast form for the trouble as well, so that was nice, who we named Weather. Time for another rival fight, again pretty smoothly. Whiskers took out Slugma, switched into Red to lower Groval's attack, where I then finished off with Batman, as well as staying in to take out Alombre. Easy. And then just before taking on the 4-tree grip, went and grabbed an Absol from the neighbouring route, and evolved Maggie and Heat in preparation. Like Norman, Winona has a super scary ace in an Altaria with Dragon Dance. In we went. Maggie took down the starting Swablu, then, like Norman, immediately into the Problemmon. Switched to Batman, predicting the Earthquake, and fired off a Confuse Ray. Then the first Dragon Dance. Problems. Switched in Red to reduce the attack to normal, and it hit itself. Nice. Then switched in Pikachu. Knew it was a bit of a risk, but thought it was worth it in order to get a paralysis off. And Altaria carried on with another Dragon Dance. But we got the paralysis. After that, decided best thing would be for Pikachu to use Shockwave, try and get Altaria in range for 2 Dragon Rages. Got the damage off, but was taken out with an Earthquake. Red came in, and with some good paralysis luck, took revenge with those 2 Dragon Rages, taking it out. Next came Tropius, who set up a Sunny Day, which definitely didn't help it against Heat's Overheat, and then took out a Pelipper and Skarmory with a couple of Thunderbolts from Maggie. Now that I've got Fly, time to visit some previous areas to get some new Pokemon, so meet Big Boy and Pilot. Was also going to get a Casper, but wasn't paying attention and accidentally killed our Shuppet encounter. Rip. Or I guess double rip for the Ghost type. Next and last rival fight. Like Winona, he incinerated a Tropius and Maggie fried a Pelipper, and then switched into Whiskers for the Slugma, and finally into Batman for Grovyle. Was a bit concerned over Screech and a crit, so switched against Pilot, and then back. This repeated a few times until finally got caught by a Pursuit, switching into Pilot, which actually worked, as without a Screech was confident staying in and finishing the Grovyle off. Next bit required a little bit of planning. I headed to Route 123 first, where our only encounter available was a Shuppet, so we did end up getting a Casper, and then went to Mount Pyra. Pyra? I'm not sure. Where we got a Duskull. We accidentally nicknamed Miklos instead of Nicholas. If we'd done the other way around and ran to a Shuppet at Mount Pyre, we would have missed out on an encounter. After that, we dealt with the Aquagrunts there, which didn't have any interesting moments. So cleared, got the Magma Emblem, and headed to Maxie in the Magma Hideout, getting a Torkoal named Vapes on the way. After waking Groudon from his nap, it was time to face the Magma boss. Started out with an Overheat from Heat, which thankfully managed to hit through Confusion and it was a one-shot, so great start. Twitchy responded with his own Camerupt. Expecting an Earthquake, we switched into Red, and then into Whiskers, who had since evolved into a Swampert. He took the Rock Slide and then retaliated with Surf. That left Crobat, so sent in Maggie, who immediately got confused and shook itself. So switched back and forth between Maggie and Red until it could get a shot off, which helped in the sense of it loaded its attack each time, but was not working. Maggie was getting battered from Confusion and then getting flinched. Decided to change things up and sent Heat in to do some damage with Overheat, which ended up crit one-shotting, so thank God for that. That Confusion was painful stuff. Like in the last hideout, we grabbed a new Mon whilst we were there in Electrode. Almost had a repeat with Maxie with Mightyena and Heat, but this time he hit himself, so switched into Batman to finish, and he responded by sending out his own Golbat, who I was sad to find out outsped Batman even being a lower level. Can't be too disappointed as he did stay in and finish it, but still. Next got to Moss Deep City and acquired a Super Rod, which went out immediately and got new Pokemon in prep for the Psychic Gym leaders, Bruce the Sharpedo. Now this fight both went well and incredibly badly. I had a big plan set up for sending out Batman and Doggo, with Doggo setting up a Swords Dance and Batman baiting Psychic attacks from both their Mons, which I would then switch in Bruce so it wouldn't affect him and Doggo could sweep. Neither worked properly. First, Xatu used Calm Mind, and worse, Claydol used Earthquake, which did serious damage to both of my Pokemon. I managed to take out Claydol before it could attack again, and then both my Mons outsped Solrock to take it out before it could attack, which only left Lunatone, which like Xatu, couldn't hurt my Dark types as they both only have Psychic. So we were home and dry, so we did end up finishing well. But not before getting a realisation. I expected with the Swords Dance from earlier for Absol to easily take out this Xatu, only for this to happen. So turns out, like flying moves from earlier being all physical attacks, Dark moves in this game are only special, meaning Absol's attack did naff all because of Xatu's previous Calm Minds. I need to keep that in mind. And now for the final time for this run, another battle with Maxie. This one with a twist though, a double battle with Steven, which I was a little concerned about. Started with Whiskers to get sided with a Surf, but ended up hurting himself due to a Swagger from Mightyena. On the other side, Steven's Metang did some good damage on Camerupt, with those following his lead, Whiskers taking out Camerupt with a Surf on the next turn. Swapped in Red for an Intimidate against the double Mightyenas, while Steven's Metang got swaggered, but managed to get through Confusion and take out one of the Mightyenas, and then a decent chunk from the second one. This allowed Whiskers to take it out and a bit of damage to Camerupt, who'd gotten a couple of amnesias off, so was a bit tankier now. Metang then came in again and got a good hit on Golbat, then survived a strong Earthquake. Then with those coming in, Red taking out the Golbat and almost Camerupt, but with Metang delivering the final blow. That just left Crobat, who Metang took out with a critical hit Psychic. What an absolute beast of a Metang Stephen put in that fight. Then our final Pokemon hunt, grabbing Bowling and Beacon before heading to our final encounter with Team Aqua. I headed straight to Archie whilst having absolutely no issues at all with the puzzles designed for a children's game. Not much to be said for Archie. He took out Mightyena with an Overheat, Maggie took out Crobat with Thunderbolt, who was followed in the same manner by a Sharpedo. After that, Kyogre got woken from his nap, and the world starts ending. So I headed to Rayquaza, again, not sure. Also was tempted to catch a Claydol on the route, but... ooh, that scared me a bit. After disturbing yet another Pokemon who was also just trying to sleep in peace, he went and told the other two to knock it off so we could head to the final gym. Now Juan went almost perfect. Maggie took out his starting Love Disc with Thunderbolt, which then led to Whiscash coming out. So we switched in Lettuce on the incoming Earthquake, who took out with a critical hit Magical Leaf. Ice Move was coming next from Mycelio, so we swapped in Maggie to tank it and hit back with a Thunderbolt, and again on the following Crawdaunt. Last was Kingdra, who I was concerned about setting up a double teams and does have rest as well. So I brought out Electrode, who I decided we wouldn't need for the Elite Four, and finished with a combination of Screech and Self-Destruct. With that, final gym cleared, and with only one Pokemon left that I wanted, which resided in Victory Road, so we headed straight there, where I had forgotten something, and that's Wally appears at the start and not the end of the path, and does start with a Dragon Dance in Altaria. Had to deal with this quickly. Luckily though, this one doesn't have Earthquake, so sent in Maggie to paralyze and to chip down, and ended up getting a lucky hit, so that went really well, as that was my only concern with this team. Delcacy was next, who was also dealt with, and then Wally brought out his own Magneton, who I couldn't switch out because of their abilities, and it was only at this late stage I found out electric types could also get paralysed in this gen, which I would have liked to say that was the last thing I'd forgotten in this run, but it unfortunately wasn't. That's for later though. Batman proceeded to take out his Roselia, and then Bruce for his Gardevoir. With that, I had one last Pokemon I wanted from my Elite Four team, and we got it. Hariyama, perfect. Now, just a little bit of damage to get ready for catching. Okay, that's a little scary. Best switch into Crobat for the quad resist, and I don't need the Elite Four. God damn it. Well, that led to some plans that needed changing. So this is all the Pokemon we had to choose from, and this is the team I ended up choosing. Let me know what you would have picked. But here we go. Started out with Sydney, where I set up a Reflect, and then brought in Pilot, who I pre-burned to activate Guts and an old Sweep with Facade. But his Mightyena hit Sand Attack, we missed, and then a Crunch plus a Burn puts us in range if we miss again. Great start. Oh, and by the way, past Loki, who's playing right now, somehow had forgotten again that Dark was special, hence Reflect not Light Screen. I then swap in Whiskers, who then immediately gets a special defense drop, into a Misjuice Sand Attack, into Reflect running out. I swapped in Lettuce, who exchanged a Magical Leaf for a Double Edge, then took another one whilst he chose Fly, but with that got the extra damage to be sure he couldn't survive the hit. Next was Absol, so I switched in Maggie, who avoided the upcoming Rock Slide, then Thunder Wave into a new Reflect. Thunderbolt almost finished, and the Absol got greedy with a second Swords Dance, so after its berry took it out of heal range, we finished it off. Crawdaunt is slower, so that gets swept quickly as well, and then came Shiftry. We paralysed it, but then got confused. So switched to Doggo and got a nice paralysis. I set up 2 Swords Dance, but at the same time Shiftry set up 2 double teams. Please hit. And finally, Cacturn, who also falls to a Slash. Very, very poor start on that Mightyena, but a deathless Sydney. Next was Phoebe. We set up a Swords Dance and used Shadow Ball, which for once in this run, I actually remembered something. That Ghost is always physical in this generation. So we one-hit Dusclops and Banette. Sableye came out, so I took advantage for one more Swords Dance, and then swept the remainder with a Shadow Ball each. Easy peasy. Third was Glacier. Maggie took out Celio with Thunderbolt, almost got Wall Rain but survived, and it struck back with the Surf. Luckily, no crit, and we could finish it off. Next out came my first Glalie, so switched in Whiskers, but got hit by a crit Icy Wind. Did some damage with Brick Break, but after the following Ice Beam, we were exactly in crit range. So switched out to Bowling, who easily shrugged off the Ice Beam, but didn't fare so well against yet another crit from a Crunch. Took him out with Body Slam, funnily enough with a crit. The second Celio was next, and decided to leave Bowling in to do some damage, until the moment when Hail stopped, so I switched in Maggie, expecting her to set up Hail again, but instead healed, so I needed this Thunderbolt to kill. Yes! Final Pokemon, her second Glalie. I swapped in Doggo, and it set up Hail again. A Shadow Ball didn't do as much as I wanted, and its Ice Beam did more than I liked. I switched back into Bowling, and he switched to using Shadow Balls, but did pretty little to us. And then had a little bit of a decision at the end. I could have risked a Surf, but wanted to play it a bit safe, so instead I rested, checked that Glalie was definitely using Shadow Ball, and on the next turn switched in Pilot, who was unaffected, and finished it off. 3 down. The final Elite Four member, Drake. We started with Maggie, who paralysed the shell gun and set up a reflect. After that I switched in Doggo to set up 2 double teams and 2 sword dances. Somehow got hit by a rock tomb, lowering our speed. Almost exactly the situation with the Roxanne from the very first gym of the game. I finished shell gun. Next was Altaria, who got a Dragon Dance boosted double edge to land before going down. Now I was in trouble. If anything hit through, it would finish us. And we were definitely going to be slower due to the Rock Tomb speed drop. I swapped to Lettuce, who tanked to Surf, and then swapped to Maggie, who tanked the Body Slam. I tried to paralyze, but missed, and was getting bombarded with smoke screens. And then by a Surf. I needed this Thunder Wave to hit. Yes. I switched over to Bowling, who used Ice Beam, then Surf so it would fall into Ice Beam range, then finished it off without giving it a chance to heal. Up next was Salamence, who made me very nervous with the Rock Slide. But he fell to Bowling's Ice Beam, and then Drake's last Pokemon, Flygon, and I decided to risk it. I went for Ice Beam, see if we could take it out now. Whew, nice. That was close. But with that, one remained. The final battle, the Champions Fight. Here we go. He starts out with Whale Lord, who went down to a crit Thunderbolt. Amazing start. Gyarados came out next, which knows Earthquake. I swap in Pilot and go for a Facade, crossing fingers it would be enough to one-shot. Oh no. Okay, that hurt. And this was where mistakes happened. First I decided to send in Doggo instead of Maggie, with the thought of using the 2 turns that we'd have, with Gyarados recharging and then the incoming heal, in order to set up, as opposed to Maggie who would finish Gyarados off. I go for Double Team and then Swords Dance, and then start attacking, swiftly realising I messed up. I'm in trouble. Not even half after a Swords Dance. One more slash almost finishes, but get finished off by Gyarados. I send in Lettuce to take it out, but has to tank a Hyper Beam to do it. Then comes out Wallace's ace, Milotic, who I send Bowling in to lower its health and paralyze, getting Toxic in the process, but we have rest, that's fine. Switching Maggie, who after some back and forth Thunderbolt recovers and a full restore, managed to finish off, but not before getting hit with a hard Surf. Out comes Whiscash, and I let Maggie go after setting up a Reflect. Lettuce comes in and was a saviour in hitting a much needed crit when Whiscash went for 1-2 and Amnesias. That just left 2, but it was already over. Tentacruel came out and finished Lettuce with Ice Beam, and followed up with a Hydro Pump on Whiskers, before we one-shot it with an Earthquake, leaving just 1 Pokemon, which unfortunately was a Ludicolo. It swiftly dispatched Whiskers with Giga Drain, just leaving Bowling, but I tried to go for a Paralysis, but it wasn't to be. He dragged it out with a Double Team, but then finished it off with a final Giga Drain. Gutted. Right to the very, very end. The last mon. A real shame that last fight I definitely could have made some better decisions. But we'll say, hugely enjoyed this challenge, really did. Even if it fell at the final hurdle, and we'll definitely be trying again with a different game in the future. I hope you enjoyed taking this journey with me, and we'll see you on the road for the next one.